Mladen Dolar is a professor and senior research fellow at the Department of Philosophy in the University of Ljubljana. His principal areas of research are psychoanalysis, modern French philosophy, German idealism, and art theory. He has lectured extensively at universities in US and across Europe, and he's the author of over 100 papers in scholarly journals and collective volumes. Apart from 10 books in Slovene, his most notable book publications include A Voice and Nothing More, and opera Second Death with Slavoj Žižek.
Can I use this? This works? Okay. Yes, this conversation is, the point of this conversation is to promote the book. And it's a very good book, buy it. So now I've done my job. I can speak about something else. Let me say a few things about why I find this project of Three Janšas interesting, philosophically interesting, and actually reaching pretty far, raising a number of very interesting questions. But I will. What's in a name? How does a name function? What is this denotation? What is involved in a denotation that a name marks? And I will start at some other end, not with the Janša project. There is a beetle in some caves in Slovenia, in a few caves in Slovenia, which is a Slovene endemic species. It only exists in Slovenia. And it's a very unremarkable beetle, which is called Anophthalmus hitleri. Here we come to the interesting part of this beetle, otherwise completely uninteresting. But it has an interesting name. Anophthalmus means blind, basically. It lives on in dark caves. And Anophthalmus hitleri, the Hitleri, as you correctly guessed, comes from Hitler. How come that this comes from Hitler? Well, this beetle was discovered in the 1930s in these caves in northeastern Slovenia, and by a Slovene actually, and it was given or sold to a German collector called Oskar Scheibel. And this collector, who was an entomologist, actually realized that this is a new species. And the one who discovers a new species is in a very extraordinary position. He's in the position of Adam. Adam could give the names to animals and everything. He was the namer. And now the one who discovers a new species has the complete liberty to give this species a name. And since this was 1930s, and this Oskar Scheibel was a great admirer of the newly elected, appointed Reichskanzler, he named this beetle Anophthalmus hitleri to honor the man that he admired. And the man himself actually acknowledged this and wrote a letter. Adolf Hitler wrote a letter to this Oskar Scheibel, thanking him for this great honor, for this beetle being named after him. And now comes the strange part of the story, the strange part where all kinds of philosophical issues come in. Namely, in taxonomy, there are very strict rules. And once a species has been named by this position, by this person in position of Adam, there is no way you can change it. You just can't change a name. I mean, this doesn't exist. Once you name this creature is forever named like this. So it's still named Anophthalmus hitleri, the name given by this Hitler enthusiast. And you have this instance of the essential instance of the big other. I mean, the names can only be given by an authority of a big other. There has to be an authority of the big other who gives the names. You cannot freely invent names. You cannot, I'll come to this, you cannot quite name yourself. There has to be an authority of the other who gives the names. And in taxonomy, this big other is really big. So you can't. It has the authority of the unchangeable names, and the result of this is that a consequence, the interesting consequence of this completely inconspicuous beetle in some 3 caves in Slovenia became a big collector's item for all the neo-Nazi memorabilia hunters. So these neo-Nazis are now paying the local kids in Slovene villages, this is really profound rural Slovenia, nobody goes there, in order to get those beetles for them. And as a consequence of this beetle is on the verge of extinction. So now, what's in a name? What's in a name? It's very interesting. A name can be very fatal. There is something in the name. The name, in this case, is read as the property of the thing. It's not read as something designating an object. It's immediately treated as a property of this object itself. So having this beetle, which is really nothing to look at, really extremely unremarkable, but it has this magic property imprinted on it by its name. So, yes, there's another funny thing. I couldn't remember the name of this beetle today, so I typed it in Google, Hitler beetle, and of course what you get is Volkswagen. You've asked one the stories of Volkswagen being there, whatever. Okay. The simple point I'm trying to get to is that, okay, this is a funny and extreme example, but you have this this strange magic connection of the name to the thing named. It's not a simple thing. It cannot be treated easily. And, well, in my text in the book, I deal at some length with Plato's dialogue, Cratylus. It's a very interesting dialogue because it has the subtitle, On the Correctness of Names. It's the dialogue which entirely deals with this question. What is the foundation of a good naming? Is there a correct name? The very idea seems somehow preposterous. Why would one name be better than another? And in this dialogue, we indeed have this person, Hermogenes, who defends a kind of modern stance that names are a convention. So any name is as good as any other name, or what we moderns all swear by Saussure, it's arbitrary. As any sign is arbitrary, names are arbitrary. But then you have Cratylus, who defends the opposite view, that there must be some sort of foundation in the thing that enables this name, so some names are better, more correct than other names. And in the dialogue, then Socrates comes up with some 130 etymologies of different words, and these are completely fancy etymologies, none of them correct and kosher, in order to show that there is something in the name. There is something in the name that nevertheless touches the thing. It cannot just be arbitrary. They must have some foundation. And the point of this dialogue is, in the end, that even though all the foundations they come up with are completely fancy and gimmed up, there is nevertheless a real of the name. There's a real of the name which nevertheless connects the name to the thing, somehow connects the name to the thing. And nobody can ever be a Saussurian. We can never actually live, psychically survive by the notion of the arbitrariness of the sign. And signs might be arbitrary, just differential, etc., etc. But we are all Cratilian at heart. somehow we believe that there must be something in the name, there must be something in this word, which is, it can't just be an arbitrary word designating a thing, come on. Nobody has ever believed this. I mean, there's one thing to establish the science of linguistics, and there is quite a different thing to actually inhabit a language. And we always inhabit a language by attaching, by making up these magic connections between names and things. And well, in my paper, I have this slogan, no name without a spectre. No name without a spectre. The moment you name something, some spectre arises. And this is why a name, and this was an interesting discussion in analytical philosophy, the name can never be reduced to a bundle of descriptions. Like Russell's example would be Socrates, the philosopher who drank the hemlock. This is a description. And then he discusses, maybe it will turn out that some other philosophers have actually drank the hemlock, or maybe Socrates didn't drink hemlock but some other poison. Would then the name still hold or not? What would be a definite set of descriptions that the name summarizes? So the name is a kind of summary of a vast number of properties that one can spell out. And this is essential. You spell out all the positive properties, and the name is just something that condenses and summarizes all these properties. As opposed to this, Saul Kripke defended the thesis that it never ever works like this. No name is ever reducible to a set of definite descriptions. And I believe it's quite true. You have a set of definite descriptions, and then you have the name. What does the name name? It doesn't name those positive traits that it's supposed to condense. It actually always refers to a certain property X, to a spectre, an unnameable thing. The name produces the unnameable. The effect of the name is to produce an unnameable X, and which would be the proper referent of the name. Apart from all the positive descriptions that one can give. So there's a kind of, there's a substance. There's a certain substance to, an unnameable substance that pertains to a name. And Russell's example was, okay, you can describe a dog by a set of definite descriptions, which would describe its dogeity. But if you have a dog named Fido, there is no fidoity. Like the fidoity doesn't, I mean, the Fido doesn't refer to any essence or substance that those creatures named Fido would share in common, except for the name. Well, my thesis is rather the opposite. I think there is fidoity. There always is the specter of fidoity. And I think that the naming of three Janšas actually brings up the specter of Janšaity. I mean, there's this new strange entity, unnameable entity, which the name evokes but cannot name. It's kind of the name evokes a phantom of Janšaity. And this is why it also causes unease, I think, in the Slovene Democratic Party, Janšas party, because somehow they arrogate the name. But okay, why would a politician of his standing care about three crazy artists changing their names or whatever? I mean, it's rather that by arrogating the name, you somehow arrogate the substance that this name, the substance, the unnameable substance this name pertains to. So this substance, the Janšaity, which is the basis of this another unnameable thing, which is called charisma, that thing, this object that the political leader should somehow possess. So by a very simple replication of the name, you somehow arrogate, touch upon, hit this unnameable, strange substance X. And thereby the name, the three Janšas somehow, by acquiring and possessing the name, they dispossess at the same time. They dispossess this substance. So let me conclude with a few things. Okay, I started with the endemic, beetle endemic only in Slovenia, so now we have another endemic creature pertaining only to Slovenia, our own homegrown species, Janez Janša, which is, as opposed to the beetle, which is on the verge of extinction because of its name, we have 3 Janez Janšas which 10 years on are doing very well. This is a species which seems to be prospering, which is really making its very good fortune. I'm very glad that this endemic Slovene endemic species is having so much success. And I will conclude with this, that there is no name without a politics. By the name, you are always inscribed in a certain social order, a certain distribution of power, a certain genealogy, whether you want to or not. By the name, you are either Montague or Capulet, to give example from Juliet. And changing a name affects the social and symbolic order that one belongs to. And we have a tradition in Slovenia, and also, not only in Slovenia, we have the tradition of partisan names, but this was a widespread phenomenon, namely the people who were fighting in clandestine conditions, such as partisans in Slovenia or the Communist Party when it was clandestine, etc., changed their names to the so-called partisan names in order to protect their identity or something. And so, Vladimir Ulyanov was famously called Lenin, somebody called Djugashvili was famously called Stalin, somebody called Bronstein was famously called Trotsky, somebody called Josip Broz was famously called Tito. So there is this tradition of acquiring, of getting, of a name change, where the name change is not only the protection of a certain clandestinity of an organization, but it also institutes, it's also a kind of institution of a new symbolic order. The renaming is like the sign of rebirth. You have the most famous boxer in the history of box, Cassius Clay, renaming himself to Muhammad Ali, which is like being born again. You know, you acquire a new name, you are born again. You belong to a new symbolic order. But the difficulty with the 3 Janšas is that, okay, they changed their names, but the usual story behind changing a name is that you acquire a new symbolic mandate. You change your religion, you are born again, you become Muhammad Ali. You belong to this Communist Party, you found a new political order, you become Tito, Lenin, something. But they changed their names. This is a very strange kind of rebirth to the name of the right-wing Slovene prime minister, not the one that would exactly inspire the idea of a rebirth, of a new kind of artistic career, life or something. Anything but, actually. So you change your name to this, it's a very kind of strange gesture of founding a new symbolic, parallel symbolic universe, as it were. And they never gave any reasons for changing their names. Whenever they were asked, they said, well, this was for personal reasons, which is the non-reason. And the non-reason. So not wanting to give any reason, not establishing a new party, or not suddenly seeing light and espousing a new religion or worldview, not even changing their artistic careers, as it were, but just creating a parallel symbolic universe. I think this was the enigmatic gesture, because you cannot simply, there is no simple interpretation of giving meaning to this gesture. One of the great things is that it's enigmatic, that it's a kind of puzzle, that you are somehow confronted with all various kinds of difficulties that the naming, the very status of name involves, including very far-reaching philosophical questions and ontological riddles. So this enigma confronts you with this. It creates a parallel universe which doesn't simply found a new meaning, but which has certainly very real effects on the established meanings. So I like precisely this kind of political implication of this renaming, of not being the renaming on the basis of a program or of a new creed, a new faith, and this was the usual cases of historical cases of the case with the historical cases of renaming, but actually to create this parallel, enigmatic, symbolic enclave, which somehow casts very long shadows on the established meanings and on the established political order. So we'll finish with this.
Thank you.